name is Douglas Arner. I'm from the University of Hong Kong. And, when I think about the big trends in RegTech, SupTech, and digital financial infrastructure, I think the starting point is really that over the past decade or so, three big themes have dominated: the financial crisis, post-crisis regulation, and the application of new technologies. And when we think about these big trends, we have to realize that this decade of the 2020s is being dominated by three big themes: sustainability, technology, but transformative technology, and an ongoing tension between globalization and fragmentation. And I think as we think about the big five trends for RegTech and SupTech going forward, the first, coming out of COVID, is really digitization strategies by central banks, governments, and regulators. We're seeing central banks and regulators in particular over the past couple of years have developed much higher levels of comfort with using technology themselves, and they are beginning processes of digitizing all of the information that they already have, of building their analytics capabilities. And as they digitize their internal processes and build analytics, they are increasingly seeking to drive external digitization. This is the idea of SupTech driving RegTech and developing the ecosystem. The second is really around the standpoint of digital regulatory reporting. If we think about one of the biggest regulatory trends right now, it is requiring reports from regulated industries to be done in a digital fashion. This is very important from the standpoint of central banks and regulators, because this means that they are taking information in a digitally native form, which they can then use more easily from the standpoint of analytics. As they require digitization in standardized forms, that drives tech spending by the industry in order to comply with these regulatory processes. And I think that really highlights the third trend, which is around infrastructure systems, particularly for digital regulatory reporting. In other words, we are seeing not only the setting of digital regulatory reporting requirements, but also building of infrastructures to take these submissions. Our classic example is really the US SEC's EDGAR system, in which all reports by listed companies and securities issuers have to go in digital form into a single system, which is then usable by the SEC from the standpoint of monitoring compliance, supervision, and enforcement actions, but also usable by industry, investors, academics, and others from the standpoint of analysis. And we are seeing very much a similar direction across the world as more and more regulators take this example of EDGAR and build systems wherein digital reports are placed to enhance efficiency from the industry, as well as to better enable their own analytics. And we're seeing this not just across infrastructures, but across digital ID systems, as well as payments, including central bank digital currencies. And I think this really highlights that as we think about these infrastructures, we're seeing more and more use of RegTech and SupTech outside of financial services. There's been this debate, is RegTech a type of fintech? And I think the answer is that one can use technology for compliance and supervisory purposes in any regulated industry. And of course, across the past 2 years of COVID, we have seen a dramatic increase, particularly from the standpoint of healthcare, using various technologies to collect, monitor, supervise information. From the standpoint of travel, increasingly from the standpoint of energy. And if I wanted to say, where do I think is the biggest growth area for compliance and also RegTech and SupTech going forward, it is probably from the standpoint of sustainability. Lots of discussions about how fintech, RegTech can help from the standpoint of sustainability. And I think it's very important that as we look at these big trends, we see 2030 as both a target for the UN Sustainable Development Goals, as well as from the standpoint of some of our climate change targets. And one of the key issues is around data. And where we are seeing is an increasing movement towards the building of digital regulatory infrastructures for the submission of various forms of ESG data along with other forms of financial data. And I think if we look at the example of ESAP, the European Single Access Point, which will bring together both mandatory digital disclosures under the various EU listing and securities laws, as well as under the EU's ESG taxonomy, this vast trove of standardized data is going to be tremendously powerful from the standpoint of looking at what works and what doesn't work, both from an investment side as well as the sustainability side. And looking forward, I think this aspect of RegTech is the one where we are going to see the greatest potential to transform our world.